Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have an anonymous question you'd like to ask me, you can send that to me at www.asksean.org. So in this video, I want to talk about breath and the ways that we can use our breath and be breathing better in general, but also use our breath in specific instances to help calm our nervous system. So I'm trained in and certified in something called sensory motor psychotherapy, which is a somatic model for therapy and working with emotions. And there's lots of cool things about that. But one of the aspects of sensory motor is this idea of different ways, different tools and methods of how we can help the nervous system to calm down. Now, one of the things, the distinctions I want to make here is whether it's using breath or using something else, is the goal here is to not make emotions go away. Like that's like really, really key. The goal actually is to help the nervous system be calmer so that we can stay with emotions longer. So sometimes, we can, honestly, in our culture, not just sometimes, there's kind of, we really like to run from our emotions. We like to run from difficult emotions. And so it can be really easy then to be like, oh, great, here's another way that I can make my emotions go away. And that is not what this is. You could try to misuse that in that way, but that won't really serve you in the long run. Your emotions aren't just going to go away. You can push them underground, but they'll find a way to surface. They'll find a way to make themselves known. So yeah, I just want to kind of give that caveat here, that this is not about getting rid of emotions. This is about when the nervous system has gotten so worked up that we're not able to stay with our emotions, that we're starting to have to disassociate in some way, that we're starting to go into survival modes like fight, flight, freeze, collapse. We're, grasping for various unhealthy coping, kind of mechanisms. When although any of those kinds of things are happening, it's like, okay, so I need to help my body to feel safer and to feel calmer so that I can stay with whatever the challenging emotion is. Because this is kind of, just to give a tiny little primer here, when the body experiences a life threat, obviously it gets overwhelmed. But the same thing can happen if our emotions get outside of whatever our current range is that we can manage. There's this technical term in the field called the window of tolerance. You may have encountered that perhaps. I prefer actually to kind of think of it as window of presence, as in what is the window of emotion, a window of experience that I can stay present to. And the ideal, right, the goal is that we're trying to expand this window so that we can stay present to more and more of our life, and we're not having to disassociate, we're not having to get overwhelmed. And so that doesn't mean that emotions can't be really intense. It's possible to feel really intense emotions but still be present. Where the body and the nervous system are still grounded enough that we're not disassociating, we're not going into fight, flight, freeze, etc. We're not going for unhealthy coping things, but we're actually staying with our emotions. We're riding that difficult wave all the way through. And that's the goal, because if we stay present longer, that means we're actually integrating experience. What's hard is when some difficult emotions come up, the body gets too activated, and then we start to disassociate in some way. And so then we're basically just repeating a trauma cycle. We're repeating whatever has happened before, where I got, something's happened previous in my life that I'm carrying unresolved emotion, in my psyche and in my body. And now I'm just replaying that experience of it being unbearable, and I'm not able to handle it. So that's not useful. So part of how we widen that window is by working to help the body to be able to be a bit more grounded so that we can stay with something longer in the window. We can work at those edges where it's still going to be really intense. When I've been doing work with myself at my edges, I've had places where I've been weeping, literally on the floor, wrapped up in a blanket and I'm weeping, but I've still been present. And so it wasn't traumatizing, even though I was metabolizing past trauma. And so that's the key distinction. Like, I was working with my body. I was wrapped in the blanket in part to try to provide some support, some structural support, some holding, right? And I was using breath. I'm doing all the things, right? And it was still super freaking intense, okay? And it was really, really hard stuff that I was working through. But I was staying present with it, and so I was again riding those waves of emotion. And so that made it healing and integrative as opposed to just re-traumatizing. Very difficult? Yes, really fucking difficult, but doable and livable. Like, I wasn't re-traumatizing myself. I was actually doing integrative work. So that's kind of a big primer, but just kind of a little bit of background on why does something like breath matter? Why use breath, at all? So, thinking about breath specifically, breath is really, really useful because it's pretty simple, and you can do it anywhere. You can even do it in the middle of a conversation. Like, I use this all the time. I tend to carry some tension in my chest. So that's one of the things I track that lets me know that, like, oh, I've got a tiny little bit of activation going on in my body. And so I'll use breath, and I'll get into the details of kind of the particulars of it, but I'll use breath. And as I'm using it, I'm really tracking for, is that tension loosening up, or is my heart rate coming down? Like, my heart rate had started kind of spiking a bit. I'm tracking for like what my body's telling me that things are calming back down. And I keep using breath until, things have kind of calmed enough. So the key to using breath is your exhales have to be longer than your inhales. Like, that's the thing. If you remember nothing else from all of this, is to make those exhales longer, to stretch them out as long as you can. So think about this, right? Like, how you may notice that sometimes you or someone else sighs, like that's the body naturally doing this exercise, right? Like, so if you catch yourself sighing, that might be a clue that, like, ooh, maybe I'm holding some tension. Maybe my body is trying to like release something. Like, let me actually do an intentional breathing exercise to like really stretch out those exhales. Now, in this video, I'm going to do 2 different forms of counted breaths. This can be helpful in terms of like just kind of getting the feel of this. You don't have to be beholden to doing a counted breath. Again, the main thing is stretching out those exhales, making the exhale longer than the inhale. So the first counted breath that I'm going to do is a 4-6 breath. So that's an inhale of 4 and an exhale of 6. This is one that I use a lot. It's kind of a big go-to in my work with clients because it's just very simple, and it's not too big of a difference, right? Because when you're not used to breathing well, and I'll say actually a couple things about how we breathe as well, just to some additional considerations there before I do the actual breaths. But it's I think it's a good starter breath, this 4-6 breath. And then there's a second one that you may have come across that's a little bit more complicated, but you'll get a bit more mileage out of it, but it's also a little harder to do. And so that's a 4-7-8 breath. So that's an inhale of 4, and then a hold of 7, and then an exhale of 8. And so it requires a little bit more breath control. It's a little bit. This obviously is much longer exhale, plus with the hold in there. But it increases sort of the impact of this. Now, the particulars of like, why does this work? You can Google if you want, but basically longer exhales, making the exhale longer than the inhale has this soothing effect on the nervous system. Like, it interacts with various things in the nervous system that says, oh, we're safe. Things are fine. We can calm down. The fires, turn off the fire alarm, everything's okay. The particulars of like how and why that works aren't terribly important here. The main thing is just to know that it works. And I think you'll find if you practice this that it's very, very effective. It's a very simple thing. Not that this fixes all things, right? Like you may need to, use breath, and also a number of other somatic things. So it's not that this there's no magic pill, right? But it is a really helpful starting point. So yeah, one more thing before I give some, kind of some demonstrations of both of these, and let me say, don't get hung up about this next piece. Don't get hung up about trying to get this right now, but I want to have this in here that you can come back to. And that is learning how to breathe down into your belly. So this is like kind of like after you've sort of practiced just doing these longer exhales, one of the versions of the one I'm about to do, sort of the next level is starting to kind of play around with what's called belly breathing. So we Americans, kind of here in modern society, we have a tendency to breathe only in our chest. But the way that our anatomy is built is like, it's actually better and easier if you let your breath extend down into your belly, because your diaphragm, which is at the bottom of your chest, your chest cavity, your rib cage, is meant to extend downward. And it's easier to you think if you've ever seen like a baby, an infant, they naturally do this. Their belly just rises and falls, and it's like, this like just cutest, adorable thing ever. So it's like that's what we're naturally meant to do. But when we only breathe in our chest, like you're having to press, fight against, all of these ribs and all those muscles and whatnot. And so that can make it harder. If you have singing experience, then you already know more than what I'm saying in terms of, and probably even know better than me about breath control and about breathing down into your belly. So I'm not telling you anything new, but for a lot of us, like this is a thing that we have to relearn. That's something I've certainly had to work at. So a way of just thinking about that is that like when you take in your breath, instead of like expanding into the chest first, you focus on breathing downward and letting your belly expand, letting your your belly puff out, like if you were a cute little baby. So the diaphragm is pressing down and it's expanding your belly, and then your chest inflates second. So this is actually making a lot more room to take in oxygen, because you're just basically, you're moving the flexible part of your body, which is your belly. You're moving that first, and then sort of your chest cavity second. So your lungs actually are able to extend downward and fill up, and then they sort of press outward just, moderately. And in some ways, it might not even be noticeable if you're just totally breathing down into your belly. Like you can't even tell right now on camera, but I'm like, I don't know if it's really visible or not, but so like there, I'm extending in. Anyways, yeah. Hopefully you get the idea. So again, that's a little bit of like a kind of a level 2 kind of thing. Don't get hung up on that right now, but I wanted you to have kind of a category of that. Pardon me, get my burps out of the way. All right. This is the 4-6 breath. So we'll breathe in for a count of 4, and we'll breathe out for a count of 6, and we'll do 3 rounds. So go ahead and empty your breath, and we'll breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let yourself return to a normal breath. So just check in there on how that feels in your body. Just even with doing this little experiment, And, potentially you weren't activated or anything. So your system may have already been pretty calm, as you're watching this video. But, depending, you may already notice a calming effect. I mean, I've had some clients practice this when they were already calm, they weren't activated, and this was like about put them to sleep. So it's, it's kind of, the effectiveness will be different for everybody. But yeah, just kind of check in for a moment. How do you notice in terms of, your jaw, your face, your head, any tension there that's released, your chest, your shoulders, heart rate. Hopefully you felt some degree of calming effect. So now we'll also do the 4-7-8 breath. And I'm going to make clips probably of both of these so that they can be played separately. And, you can just do them on repeat and whatnot, as that's something a lot of my clients have been asking me to do for years, is to make some clips of these. The 4-7-8 breath. We'll do an inhale for a count of 4. We'll hold for 7. And then we'll exhale for a count of 8. And we'll do 3 rounds. And go ahead and empty your breath. And inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale for 8, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let yourself return to a normal breath. And again, check in with yourself there on kind of how that's feeling and how your body's doing. And that's a little bit more of a challenging breath. It's a little bit more challenging to count, obviously. I stumbled there slightly. But yeah, the hold there is kind of, it helps sort of, and the longer exhale, obviously both of those things kind of sort of amplify the effect of this one. So yeah, give those a try. As I said, breath is, if you get skilled at this, you can do it in the middle of a conversation. You can, be talking and you can take in a nice deep belly breath and let it out slowly as you're having a conversation and just really be calming your nervous system down. So yeah, hope that you find this useful. Until next time, peace be with you.